and welcome to Colette and Matt have entered the chat, the single most important podcast about the single most important topic in human civilization. That's right.
Video games.
Thank you very much. I am your co-pilot, Matt Silverman. I'm here with the one and only Colette Bennett. How are you?
I'm excellent.
That's it? Just excellent? There's nothing...
No, that's it. I'm excellent.
Okay. Great. It's usually just us geeking out here, but today is a very special episode because...
Agent Mulder believes we are not alone.
We are not alone. It's another one of those. We have with us the gaming historian. His name is Norman Caruso. If you're listening to this show, you already know who this person is. He needs no introduction, but I'll give him one anyway. He is one of the most rigorous, studious documentarians on the YouTubes and makes these brilliant documentaries about video games, but also their history, their cultural impact, their technological impact, everything we love about them, mostly retro stuff, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. Norman Caruso, the gaming historian, welcome to the chat.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We are thrilled to have you. We're going to just hang. We're going to talk about things we're playing. But before we begin, we would love to know, how did this all get started? These videos are so labor intensive. They are clearly labors of love. And perhaps this is still a hobby. Perhaps this is now your full-time job. What's going on? How did it all begin?
Well, it started as a hobby. And I guess I was feeling creative, and I started this show back in 2008.
Wow.
So I'm an old man on YouTube. Been around a long time. I was a sophomore in college. I was majoring in history, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working at GameStop as well. And people would bring in like these buckets and bins full of old Nintendo games and Super Nintendo and Genesis and PlayStation 1. And GameStop didn't take those games anymore. And I grew up playing all that stuff. So we weren't supposed to do this, but I would say, hey, meet me a little later and I'll buy these from you.
That's the best.
Yeah. So I really got into collecting. And then, I majored in history as well at college. And I was like, I want to learn more about like the history of video games, how this all started. And so I started reading books, and then I watched G4 Icons, which was a fantastic show.
Oh, it was.
And I said, well, I want more video game history content. So I went online, and there really just wasn't anything out there.
Yeah.
So I guess, like I said, I was feeling creative, and I said, well, I'll make something. And that's kind of how the show started. And it was totally a hobby. I didn't make any money doing this. I did it for fun. And I've been doing it ever since. And now I'm happy to say it is my full-time job. This is what I do for a living.
Fantastic.
That's so wonderful.
Yeah. So
I just want to briefly go back in time with a smidge of context that I'm sure you can elaborate on. YouTube did not even exist until 2005. So the 2008 is a very immature social video ecosystem, let's say, for lack of a better concept. So it is truly Wild West YouTube times, a YouTube time where the mainstream public probably still perceived YouTube as like, that's where the cat videos are,
that's exactly what it was.
Okay. And so you're like, hello, everyone. Here is 20 minutes on, at the NES or something. Like, set the stage there for us.
Yeah. So as far as like YouTube, the YouTube video game scene, specifically like retro stuff, it was mostly angry comedic reviews of old games. So Angry Video Game Nerd, Irate Gamer, all those types of shows. There were some other review shows, but again, it was really based in comedy. People were making jokes about these old games and having a good time. And I kind of wanted to do a more serious approach to video game history. And it definitely was very different from the other stuff that was coming out. And sometimes people did not like that. I had a friend say, you should say more jokes on your show. Your show is too dry.
Oh God.
And I said, but I don't think that's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, now it's very different. Now on YouTube, you can find everything. You can find anything to satisfy whatever you're craving.
But the nice thing is that you had roots down doing this before any of those things existed.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. I mean, I think personally, I feel like being the quote unquote old gamer in the room is a good thing, which I too am what I would consider to be an old gamer. So, if your first console was the Atari, I think you're officially I'm officially in that space. So,
yeah.
The tenacity to look at a YouTube of 2008 to see no one doing anything like you were doing, and also for friends to say, hey, you should do it like these other YouTubers. In hindsight, they were wrong, but in the moment, that's a valid point that they were making. So like, how was there a moment that was like, I'm on to something, or was it years of drudgery with no one watching and just kind of plugging away at the hobby because you loved it?
I'm very lucky in that when I first started, it kind of took off. Now this was an era where you didn't make money on YouTube, right? But I was gaining a lot of viewers and subscribers, and people were just really enjoying the show. And a lot of people were saying, this is really refreshing. I like that you're taking this stuff seriously. I like that you do your research. And so I liked that kind of feedback. So I said, I want to keep doing this. And then, gosh, I was just doing it as a hobby from 2008 to 2015. So 7 years. It was just for fun as a hobby. And then in 2015, I got my first check from YouTube, and it was like $100 or something. It was like not a lot. But I said, you know what? If I'm gonna try this, now's the time to do it. I don't want to do it when I'm like 50 years old. So my wife and I, we saved our money, and I quit my job and I did it full time, and then it just took off from there when I was able to devote all my time to it. So I've been doing it full time for 6 years.
Wow,
nice. And that job was it still like games retail stuff, or had you moved on to other career pursuits?
Oh man, I have quite the career path. I worked at GameStop. I worked at a restaurant, washing dishes and being a prep cook. I repaired computers in college. I was a teacher for about 1.5 years. And then my wife's from Kansas City, and we moved to Kansas City. And when you move somewhere new, your teaching license has to be renewed, and it's a big pain in the butt. And teachers don't get paid a lot, and I hate it.
Yeah.
So I knew computers, so I got into IT stuff. So I was doing like software support when I quit, and that's when I quit and did Game and Historian.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. I enjoy what I do now. I'll say that. The corporate world drives me nuts.
Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah.
It really, really sucks. Yeah, but that always makes me like so happy to hear, because like I too have had a variety of different jobs, and then found my way into writing about games, which then like opened up my entire career in the direction of games. And that's something that I, didn't think could ever possibly happen to me. I don't have any formal journalism background or anything like that. But it's been, great to find my footing in a place that I feel like I belong.
Yeah, it's always a nice feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I'm astounded that 2015 was the first check, because when did YouTube, is that the earliest that YouTube became a monetizable platform for creators? It seems so recent.
No, I think they enabled monetization for a limited number of channels, I think starting in like 2010, 2011. Yeah. But yeah, what a lot of people did was they put their videos on Blip. I don't know if you remember the site Blip.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Blip had monetization very early on.
Interesting.
And so a lot of content creators had their own websites, and they would put their content on their website, and then they would put like a trailer on YouTube and say, hey, if you want to watch this, you got to go to my website. And then Blip went under like very quickly.
Yeah.
It was not sustainable at all. And then,
but perhaps that put pressure on YouTube to say, hey, like these creators are making outstanding things. There needs to be a business model here, at least something for the creators.
Maybe it's definitely possible because then YouTube enabled monetization for like specific channels. And then you saw people make YouTube an actual business.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I did get paid from YouTube every now and then before 2015, but I mean, it was like nothing. I mean, like you're talking like, I think the minimum payout was like $20.
Right.
And so, and then when I was hitting like $100, I said, okay, well, if I put more time into this, maybe I can make it grow. And then that's when I decided to do it full time.
Yeah. And stuck with it. I mean, again, your work is so labor intensive. I'm repeating myself, but my God, we come from the world of media and journalism, and the effort that goes into this stuff is so much. And then you're getting $100 in the mail every 6 months. Like, it's so defeating sounding. So you have to love it. But did you look ahead into some future and say, there is a business here? Or did you get that $100 check and you're like, well, this is a dead end financially, but I just love it so much, I got to keep going?
Sorry, my puppy's barking. Sorry, could you repeat the question?
No, of course. No, just saying like getting $100 checks for all this work is so defeating. So were you looking ahead at a business model on the horizon, or were you like, this is still just for fun, I'll never make a living here?
No, I definitely saw potential. I really thought it could become a thing.
Yeah. And then Patreon, I think, is part of this equation, at least in the recent couple of years, right?
Yeah. So after I started doing it full time, I definitely said I need to make this sustainable. So I started a Patreon, and Patreon has been a complete game changer for me. It has just been so wonderful for the show. Yep. And the big reason is I can dive into like more obscure stuff that I know probably won't get a lot of views, but I think it's important to do. Mm-hmm. But because I have Patreon, I'm allowed to do that. I don't have to worry about the algorithm beast, like trying to play around the algorithm.
Right.
Yeah.
I often talk about Patreon as the PBS model for the internet, finally, where it's like no one is going to pay for a 20-hour documentary about the Civil War. Like, that's not a mainstream thing, but because a handful of people... I would
definitely pay for that, by the way.
Well, that's my point. A handful of people care about it and want to make sure that it exists, and they will pay for it so that everyone else can have it too. And we have Ken Burns, and we have the gaming historian. So bless the platforms like Patreon. I'm a big fan, and I'm glad it's working out so well for you.
Yeah, man, Patreon is just so wonderful because, like, even just like making the videos better, it's all thanks to Patreon. This last video I did a video on the Sega Mega Modem. It just came out yesterday.
Yeah, ooh, I haven't seen it yet.
It's pretty interesting. Check it out. But this is a super obscure piece of hardware that only came out in Japan. And so thanks to Patreon, I can like get all of this random Sega hardware, and I can film B-roll of it. I can make it look nice. And that's really important to me when I make these documentaries, because a lot of people will just find an image of the Mega Modem and put it on the screen and say, this was the Mega Modem. But I want to make it look nice, I want to make it feel like a real documentary.
Yeah. That one image is not going to carry you through, the 25 minutes of discussion. It's one image. You need more than that.
No,
Right.
and I always, when my wife watches Dateline, they use like the same image of like the victim throughout the
Over
episode.
and over and over.
Yeah, and I'm like, it drives me nuts because I'm like, come on, I wouldn't do this. You know, I'm making YouTube videos.
You got to cut corners somewhere, even on Dateline, I suppose.
I'm like, surely there's more than one picture of this person.
I have my favorite episodes from your channel, and I know Colette does too. And I want to yield the floor to her before we get into other. We have some listener questions for you directly, Norman, and then we can chat about some more stuff. What else you got, Colette?
Well, gosh, this is hard because I think, like when I'm on YouTube and I see the gaming section, right? Like, there's so many clickbaity kind of things. And like, there's nothing wrong with that. I get it. I get that there's a huge audience for that. But I guess I'm just not that type of gamer as much, like I want to be educated and I want to learn things that I didn't know. So I think for me, it's just really exciting. I think the first time I ever saw an episode, God, it might have been I think it was maybe the history of Super Mario Brothers 2.
Yeah, I love that one.
And I was glued, because when these games were out, I think I was about 9 or 10. And so, I was playing them and I wasn't one of those lucky kids who got a Nintendo Power subscription. So I, had nothing. Like it was an echo chamber. I didn't have a lot of friends. I was a loner kid. And like, you were just playing these games and like, they were just, that's all you knew about is the games. And so there were so many things that I didn't know. And even as I got older and even as I got into the game industry, I found myself like, these were kind of like the benchmarks, right? The little bricks in the wall of my, makeup of like, oh, yes, this game made a part of who I am and this game and this game. But I think that one thing that I love so much about what you do, well, two things. One, the fact that it is such a kind of earnest, like, rigorous, as Matt said, like take into a topic. I know that if I'm going to watch a video you've done on something, I am going to leave learning so much I didn't know. And I love that. That is absolutely like awesome to me.
Well, good. And also that context, you know what it is? The SMB2 one is like, we all played that and it was like, wow, that's a fun game. But then you look at it in a historical and business context and it's like, this game is fucking wacky and crazy in the context of the time it was made. Who thought of this? And then, your video goes and looks up the discussion and the quotes and the whatever from these Japanese developer. And they were just like, yeah, what if it was Mario, but crazy? And that's like, right. And then you look back on it and it's like, oh, that fun game we played as kids was actually quite groundbreaking for the medium, for the art form, and I did not know this context of that until seeing a piece of media like this.
Yeah, like I think for me, the hunger to learn more about the background about not just the basics, not just, oh, Super Mario Brothers 2 was not supposed to be a Mario game and then they made it one. Like, people, we know that, right? But like some of those deep dives about things, I don't know. I guess it's just because it's one of my favorite topics and it's also like one of my favorite things to learn, like a deep dive about a topic's history. So I think that combo is just, so awesome for me. But anyway, I'm getting way off the topic, which is Matt asked, what are my favorite episodes? I get the most excited when an episode is really long. So like when I saw the story of
no
Tetris,
one ever.
No, seriously though, like when I saw the story of Tetris was 59 minutes long or roughly about that time, I was like, yes. And I was like, Patrick's my husband. I was like, Patrick, go get the popcorn. Like this is going to be great. So, it's nice, I think, there are a lot of things that we subscribe to on YouTube that are there and that we like and that we might be like, oh, let's watch this or, oh, let's watch that, but like we're excited when a gaming historian video comes out. So thank you so much for all that work and time that you put into something that was once a hobby and became your career. I mean, it's just, I think especially I think especially for gamers in their like late 30s, 40s, and even 50s, it's extremely exciting for like those demographics because we are the kids that just didn't know anything about the games we were playing, but they made up such a big piece of our world, you know?
Yeah. Well, you're going to be very excited because this Mega Modem video is about 30 minutes long.
Yeah.
So I think I know what you're doing tonight.
That's another quick thing I just want to throw in before I give up the floor is that I love learning about all the peripherals that I didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
That has been a joy for me because even though I don't have a huge collection at home, I'm forever fascinated by like all the bells and whistles surrounding this particular time period in games. So
yeah,
yay.
It's so wacky what they came out with.
It really is. Actually, I don't know if you remember, this was around the time that I was covering games, so around 2007, 2008. But at one point, Nintendo had a press conference in which they introduced a thing during the press conference. It was like when the Wii was big, and they put it on your finger, and it was like was supposed to take like your heart rate or something, but it was like a little plastic like thing they put over your finger and like a clip, just like you would get in like a medical facility.
The vitality sensor.
Yes, that was it. I couldn't remember the name, but like I remember being like, "What the fuck are they doing?" And then like it was gone. Like after that, like
You never saw it again.
No, it was gone. So
Yep.
I don't know. It just makes me think about things like that, you know.
Yeah. Actually, I'm researching the U-Force right now. Do you remember the U-Force?
I don't.
No.
This was a controller for the Nintendo Entertainment System that you didn't touch anything. So it had these like infrared sensors. It looked like a laptop, and you opened it up, and it had these infrared sensors, and wherever you moved your hand, it would detect what button you were pressing.
In the late 90s, there were two major video.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm researching that right now, and I was able to talk to the inventor of it. So
amazing.
That should come out later this year. But there's the U-Force. I did the Power Glove.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite by far was the Hot Seat. I don't know if you remember that episode.
That's a great video.
I haven't seen that one. What is that?
That is my absolute favorite thing I've ever found. It is a literal chair that you sit in, and you kind of just move around in it, and that's how you play Nintendo games. It had a joystick on the armrest for your A and B buttons.
This is what gets me about this stuff is like, it sounds so dumb in hindsight, but like, so does the Wii, you know?
Right.
So any of these things with the right mix of marketing, tech, and software could have become the way we play video games for a time, or could be still playing them today. And like, the Wii is idiotic, except for Wii Sports, one of the best-selling games of all time.
Mm-hmm.
It just made sense and clicked, and grandma could now play tennis with you, and it was amazing, you know. And so that chemistry could have blown up in Nintendo's face, or become the best-selling console ever. That's amazing, and I love. I share Colette's love of the obscurity of these the episodes where you focus on obscurity. It's really fun.
Then I think one of the listeners asked this, so I don't want to jump too far ahead of them. But one thing I'm really curious about is like how difficult it is to find out things about some of these items and games that are like, you know, way back in history. So, but I think a reader asked that, so.
Okay.
I'll hold my breath for a minute.
Yeah. All these weird controllers, especially for the Nintendo Entertainment System. I mean, Nintendo basically revitalized the industry in 86, 87. Mm-hmm. And so it was this new market that was overtaking the toy industry. And so you have a lot of toy companies and video game companies just trying to find any way to make money off this new thing. And so controllers were a big thing to make money on, especially because there was also a chip shortage. I mentioned that in the Mario 2 video. There was a chip shortage in 1988. So they couldn't make a lot of games. And so if you can't make games, well, I guess I'll make accessories instead. And so got to keep the money flowing, right? And so you get
Very
all these weird controllers coming out. They would try anything. Like Mattel Toy Company makes the Power Glove.
Right.
Yep.
So speaking of weird, but also not so weird peripherals, top favorite episode of mine is Mario Paint.
I love that video. That's one of my personal favorites.
Good. I'm thrilled to hear that.
Yeah.
Knew it was coming out, through maybe Patreon updates or something that you had sent out, and was like, okay, here it is. Can't wait. Sat down with my daughter and my wife too, actually, who I don't remember. I don't think she played it as a kid, but was definitely aware of it. My daughter's 8 and she's very creative and she's into computers and she's into art and of course games. And we watched it. Oh, side note, footnote, the way Colette is talking about like, hey, grab the popcorn. I just freaking love that YouTube is a popcorn ecosystem now, if you want it to be. You know what I mean by that? Yeah. And Norm is not the only person making popcorn content, but I just am so thrilled that we are here in 2021 eating popcorn, watching YouTube videos. I digress. Watched it, loved the Mario Paint doc, and then rushed to a computer to get an emulator to load it up. And my daughter started making stuff in Mario Paint in 2021 or 2020 probably, when that came out. And that brought me a lot of happiness. And then we wouldn't have embarked on that if not for the discussion you had brought up. You brought to the
That's
platform.
really cool. That's why I make these videos, for moments like that.
And then and to comment on what Colette was saying, like, it's for older gamers who remember it and go, and it's all about nostalgia. I'm putting words in your mouth, Colette. You didn't say that, but I
partially
hope that
said that.
You partially said that,
but I know that's not it. It's just that I can only speak for me, right? And like, it's like, I'm one of those. And so I'm just like, oh, this is so great. But, for all I know, maybe your kids are also like, wow, this is amazing. I don't know.
Yeah, having putting my favorite medium and art form into historical context is so valuable for my kids. And you would think a kid would not want to watch a 20-minute, 30-minute documentary, but they do. And she did, and she loved it. We also watched Console Wars. Have you seen that, Norman? It was on CBS All Access, I think.
Yeah, I have not watched it yet, but it's in my queue.
I'll provide you with some materials if you are unable to access it. But it is so good, and very much in your style of like, here's what was going on in the business world. To your point earlier, Norman, about like, Mattel and toys and what are toys in the 80s and how much money do they bring in and who needs to win this race and that the things that Nintendo bet on and the things that Sega bet on and who won the bets at various times is just so fascinating. My wife and I were riveted by that documentary, and she's not even that much of a gamer, so.
Yeah, I read the book when it first came out.
Nice.
And super interesting, good insider info on that whole rivalry between Nintendo and Sega. So I definitely want to watch the documentary. And I think they're making a like dramatic mini-series on Console Wars too.
Oh, that would be awesome.
I think they're doing that.
That would be really cool.
Don't quote me on that.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure they are, though.
I will hope for that. Colette, do you want to dive into some of the listener questions for Norman?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to choose my husband's questions first because I'm biased and also they're good.
Okay.
Okay. So first he wants to know, what video game history topic would you not cover?
Oh, God. I do have one.
Ooh.
And I'm afraid to say it.
You don't have to say it if you're not comfortable. Okay.
No, I have to. I don't think I could ever do an episode on Pokémon.
Really?
I just don't think I could do it. It's such a massive franchise.
Yeah.
And it has a very diehard fan base. And it's just very intimidating to me.
Like the fan base might set you on fire if you forgot like one tiny piece of...
Maybe. You never know.
Yeah.
It's really just the amount of work to do an episode on Pokemon,
Yeah.
it would be massive.
Yes.
Maybe a few years down the line I'll tackle it, but right now I think about it and I just dread it. I'm like, I just couldn't do it.
Well, the good part is that you don't ever have to do it if you don't want to.
Yeah, you don't have to do what you don't want to do.
So, and I hear you.
Yeah, it's also a topic that I think a lot of people have kind of dove into already. So, yeah, as far as like topics I won't touch, I feel like I would cover just about anything. But yeah, there are some topics like Pokemon where I'm like, oh God, that's so much work.
The bigness of the Pokemon franchise is astoundingly big. So I feel you there. But your episodes are to my knowledge, you have not done Super Mario Brothers, the entire franchise. You have focused on specific titles. So is there a way into Pokemon of like, and forgive me, I don't know Pokemon. Red and blue, or what, gold and silver. Is there a specific game?
That's probably how I would have to tackle it. I stopped playing Pokemon after gold and silver, and I thought as a kid, there's so many Pokemon, 250. They'll never make more. And now there's like 900 Pokemon. So
I didn't play Pokemon for a long time because I was intimidated by, even though I knew it was, not that the story wasn't, that like ongoing from installment to installment. I was always like, well, it's too big. Like I can't,
Yeah, it kind of intimidates people in a way. There's just like so many Pokemon, and they have Pokemon that are like, it's like a skeleton key is a Pokemon. They're just like making up all these weird Pokemon. It's like, are they running out of ideas? I mean, but yeah, I stopped after gold, silver. I loved gold and silver. I think that's my favorite out of all the Pokemon I've played. I tried to play Pokemon X on the 3DS, and I just couldn't finish it.
Just wasn't feeling it.
This is a question for you as a person who sounds like you enjoyed it in your youth. I feel like I was just too old to be. I missed it generationally when it was big. I mean, it's always been big, but when it really came to prominence, and then I couldn't go back, not because I was afraid or it felt too big, but more like, is this for kids? And so let me reframe that. I have no nostalgia for Pokemon. So I understand deeply people going back playing Game Boy games. I totally get it. Can I go back and play a Game Boy game from 1992? I don't think that I can, but I'm eager for someone to tell me, oh no, this holds up. It's great. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does anyone here know? I don't know. That's a question for the listeners, perhaps too.
Are you asking, is the original Pokemon games worth going back to? Is that what you're asking?
If I have zero nostalgia or context for them, yes.
If you have zero nostalgia or context, I would not play the original Pokemon games.
Ooh.
They're kind of slow. I think the remakes are much better. Okay. So they did like a Fire Red and Leaf Green version on the Game Boy Advance. Kind of fixed all the issues with the original Red and Blue. And then they did remakes on the DS. They did Heart Gold and Soul Silver for Gold and Silver. I would actually play those. If you want to start your Pokemon journey, play Heart Gold or Soul Silver on the DS.
Great advice.
Nice.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. That's my hot take.
Hot taken.
Okay. I will move to the second question, which is, what was the topic that took the longest to research?
Oh, God. Tetris.
Really?
Yeah, Tetris. There's just so many. There's so many people involved. And there's also just a lot happening in that story. And so getting the information right and getting the timeline right and putting all the pieces together to make sure it makes sense and you're telling the story in a coherent way, that just took a long time.
Yeah.
I hope it came across in the video that it made sense.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely thought it did. But yeah, like sometimes when I'm watching those, like one moment I always have is like, oh my God, like how long must it have taken to find, like, to, trace back this source or to find this thing, and as a journalist who has traced back my sources for many years, I'm like, good God.
Yeah. Oh yeah. When doing research, I get so hung up on stuff. One time it took me, I spent all day verifying a sentence in one of my scripts. And I was like, well, this is just what I got to do. This is how it works. So yeah, the Tetris, I think I started that episode in August 2017 and it got uploaded in February of 2018. I think that's right. So like
it took that long.
6 to 8 months, yeah. I think.
But I can't imagine how rewarding it must be to work on something that long and then look at it and be like, I did it. I finished it. There it is.
Yeah, so that was really the moment where I said, this is where I want the show to go. I want to make these long form documentaries because it's the most gratifying for me to make stuff like that. Now, every now and then I'll put out a short episode if I find something that interests me. Like in January of this year, I did like a little 8-minute video on the Homework First lock.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Another one I didn't know about.
Yeah, just this weird thing that came out, and I said, well, this is just funny. I have to make a video about this. But yeah, my favorite thing is the long form stuff. So that's really what I focus on now.
Yeah, it's great. It's like, to me, it's like the difference between like writing a long form, like, feature versus like, a quick blog or whatever. And my whole thing has always been the long features too. It's fun.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun. And
it's a lot of fun.
Just to put all that work into it when it finally comes out, you're like, yeah, you're exactly right. You're like, I did it. It's done.
So I have a question about this because I feel that feeling, but also simultaneously abject terror. To work for a year or more, as you described, on a 1-hour definitive documentary of a thing, and then to hit a publish button, knowing you can really not take that back or fix anything after it's published. And here's the problem with video is, like, Colette, you were saying, oh, I'm going to write a feature. Oopsie daisy, I made a mistake. I attributed something, or I misinterpreted a piece of research. Let me just update that. Ain't no updating in a video. So that is terrifying to me. And my
also
adjacent
the fact
question,
that the internet will tell you. They will tell you
my
if you
question.
get literally anything wrong. Always.
What have you gotten wrong, and how do you address it when commenters point it out to you?
So last year, I had this idea to make a video about times I've been wrong.
Okay.
And so I had a friend of mine, we combed through all of my comments looking for people that said I'm wrong. And believe it or not, most of the commenters were wrong themselves.
Right. I do believe that.
There were a few that were correct. They pointed out a mistake I made. And so I made a video called What Facts Did I Get Wrong? And I just went through some of my older videos and I said, yep, I got that wrong. Yep, I got that wrong. And it's okay to make mistakes. That's the only thing I can say. And in history, especially as historians, it happens all the time, because the history is just memories of the past. That's all it is. So it's like we just have to tell the story the best we can, the most accurate way we can. And sometimes we make goofs, and so you put out revisions, or like I'm in grad school right now, and we can't research anything that's older than 5 years, because the professors want the latest research on stuff. And so, looking back on my videos from 2008, it's probably outdated information,
right?
But you got to start somewhere, right? I mean, if nothing's perfect. I've never put out a perfect video.
It's a process. It's a journey, and I will make one amendment to the statement you made. It is okay to make mistakes.
If
you address them, which you did.
Yeah, and sometimes I'll like add in the description of the YouTube video, like, hey, at timestamp, blah blah blah, I said this, I actually meant this, or something like that. Like in my Mega Man DOS video, I said the game came out in 1993, but it actually came out in 1992. I think I made a typo when I was typing the script, and when I narrate, I just read whatever's on the screen, and I don't think about like fact checking while I narrate. So yeah, sometimes I'll just put a correction in the description.
Yep.
You do what you can.
Transparency. Yeah. I mean, this is what legacy journalism is all about, is like the New York Times is not credible because they don't make mistakes. They are credible because they take that so seriously. For 100 years, they have said, oopsies, this is actually the case. And that is just so important if you are writing history.
Teddy Roosevelt has a great quote. He said, the man who never makes a mistake is the man who never does anything.
Yes, that's awesome.
So, yeah, I like that quote.
I like that too. That's awesome. Okay, one more question. No, actually, I take it back. 2 more questions from my very inquisitive husband.
Okay.
What is the process of creating an episode?
All right. Big question. Well, first it's finding a topic. And I find them in all sorts of ways. Sometimes I'll just be flipping through an old video game magazine and I see, like, the Mega Modem episode is a perfect example. I was flipping through an Electronic Gaming Monthly magazine and it said Mega Modem, the future of video games? Question mark. And I said, wow, I've never even heard of this thing. And they thought it was the future of video games. So that became a topic. Yep. Sometimes I'll be researching something completely different and then I'll stumble on something else while I'm researching it. And I'll say, wow, that's more interesting than what I'm researching. And I'll just drop what I'm currently working on and go to something else. And a lot of times it's just my favorite things that I played when I was a kid. So Super Mario Brothers 3 I have so many wonderful memories of playing that game with my older brother.
Aww.
And so I said, I'm making a video on it. And I did a big series on the Wolfenstein games because that's one of my favorite video game series. So yeah, so first thing is finding a topic, and the next part is doing the research, and that's really just casting a wide net and just pulling whatever I can find. Whether it's trying to get in touch with people involved, newspapers, magazines, books, just anything and everything.
I meant, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, do you find yourself often like having to track down like makers of games and talk to them directly because like other information just isn't really available?
Yes. I'll give you an example with the U-Force. When I did, so Patreon voted on that topic. They wanted to see a history of the U-Force. And so I just went to the Wikipedia page and I was like, what's out there about the U-Force? And I think there's like one paragraph. And it was like, the U-Force was a controller. It came out in 1989 and no one bought it. And that was the paragraph. And I said, wow, that's not very interesting at all. So I got in touch with like 5 different guys that worked on this thing. And the story is incredible how they made this thing. And nobody knows about it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's getting in touch with the people involved, because relatively the video game industry is still pretty young when you're comparing it to other histories. So a lot of these people are still alive and they're working regular jobs still. A lot of people are still in the industry. So yeah, I always try and get in touch with the people that made these games, and awesome. they have the best insight.
Yes,
obviously,
because no one told their story because they failed, quote unquote, failed.
Right.
So there is no book or article or movie about them to reference. It is only in their minds, and so you are extracting, as you said, amazing stories from the minds of people who are still alive to tell those tales. It's wonderful.
yeah, there's that, and there's also they have the mindset of, well, that was just my job, dude. I was just like this guy that worked at Bruderbund, and I designed manuals, and I did the manual for the U-Force. And so he's looking back at this, and he's thinking, I can't believe you're even wanting to talk to me about this. This is just something I did as my job, but like it's important to the history of that controller or that game, you know?
Well, and I think maybe, you know, from outside games, as gamers, as consumers, rather than being within the industry, maybe we think of like, you know, oh, like it's so cool that, you know, this guy worked on, I don't know, Diablo or something. But like a lot of the people that worked on those games, that doesn't mean their whole lives, you know, were about games. Like they may have moved on to something else, or they may have just been like, oh, whatever, that was no big deal. Like we think of it differently because we're the consumers, I think.
Right. And very often when you interview these people, they'll get some stuff wrong because they can't recall it was like 30 years ago, you know? But yeah, it's a great resource to have when you're doing research. And then after you gather all the research, you have to write the script. And I think this is the hardest part of doing good history, is telling a story.
Yeah.
And I think you see a lot of content on YouTube that one of my professors calls it this then that history, where it's like this happened, then that happened, then this happened, then that happened. And he said, I mean, that stuff's important, but if you want people to enjoy it and take it in, you have to tell it as a story. And I think that's really important when we're talking about history. I mean, the word story is in the word history. So that's the most fun part, when you have all the research in front of you and you have to organize it and you have to edit, you have to take stuff out, you have to put stuff in, and you have to tell a great story about the past.
Yeah.
And then once you tell the story, I do the voiceover and I edit, and I end up redoing the voiceover like 5 times because I'm like, I don't like the way that sounded, and I go up and I re-record one sentence, and it's a process. But yeah,
but you're doing it all. You're not farming it to any, not farming in a pejorative way, but like you don't have a team or collaborators. You're doing everything in house.
I do. Here's my team. It is me. I do everything, and then my wife, Kristen, she is my script editor. So I give her the script and I say, make this better. And she has a journalism background. She's a terrific writer. She has a podcast, by the way. You should check it out.
Ooh. Plug it. What is it?
It's called Let's Go to Court.
Okay.
Ooh, cool.
What is it about?
It's true crime, you know.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's all the court stuff, you know. So sometimes, of course, there's grisly murders, but sometimes they do like a guy got his pants stolen at a dry cleaner and he sued the dry cleaner for $6 million or something stupid like that.
Wow.
So that's it. It's me and my wife edits the scripts, and then I do pretty much everything else, and that's the gaming historian team.
Love it.
I do have friends that help me in some ways. Like if you recall the Tetris episode, there were a lot of illustrations in that episode. So my friend Sean is an illustrator, and so he does a lot of the art for me because I am not a good artist. I can't draw. And then I have a sound mixer. His name's Emmy, and his company's Proximity Sound. And because I decided with Patreon support, I hate mixing audio. One, because I'm, as you mentioned earlier, Matt, when you hit publish, there's no going back. Yeah. And so if I put out a video and I'm like, oh, the background music's too loud, and I notice it and it's really bothering me, that's why I'm like, I don't want to deal with it anymore. I want to let a professional do it.
There is nothing that hurts more than that. After you hit that button and you watch it later, you're like, oh my, wow, this pixel is in the wrong. Oh my God.
Exactly. And audio mixing is like this whole other industry.
It's a
besides
mess, man.
Video editing. So
you know,
I contract that out.
Which I applaud. And because you're sitting at your computer and you're like, this is great. and then you watch it on a phone and you're like, this sounds like dog shit. What was I thinking?
You know, a buddy of mine said the best way to check your audio levels is to listen to it in your car.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
But I just said, you know what? I think I'm just going to pay someone to do this. I don't want to get in my car and listen to an episode of the Gaming Story.
Right, for an hour. Yeah, I mean, that's usually music. Is usually the car test for music is a thing. But I've never heard about that for like film or documentary or anything.
Yeah, but everything else, the writing, the research, the video editing, everything else that's what I do.
Yeah,
I have a much more boring question than Colette's last question about primary sources, because that's so cool that you got to track those folks down.
Yeah.
But what I was also thinking about, like, that there's probably a limit to the digital research that is available. And by that, I mean Wikipedia, sources, books, and then you're like, and now there's a piece of microfiche in a library in Japan, and I cannot get there. Have you gone places in order to find things? You call up libraries, like any bridges there that you've had to cross?
Oh, absolutely. I did an episode about a 9-year-old that sued Nintendo. Yeah. So the story is he bought Major League Baseball on the Nintendo Entertainment System. And it was made by LJN, which is they're a notorious video game company. They're known for putting out really bad games. And he was under the impression that his favorite players would be in the game, but that game didn't have player names. They didn't have the license from the MLB Players Association. So it was just like numbers. Mm-hmm. And so he sued Nintendo and said, this is false advertising. You said I could play with my favorite players and they're not in there. So I saw a headline for this in a newspaper. And I just thought, that is wild that a 9-year-old sued Nintendo. And so I was like, well, okay, this went to court. I'm going to call the archives of, where, I think it was in Connecticut where this happened. So I called the archives and I told them about it. And so let me back up. I am a user of the website Pacer. It's lawyers use it. You can look up court cases.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay.
Neat.
Yeah. So I knew the kid's last name. I put it in, and it's so and so versus Nintendo of America. Found the court case number. I called the archives. I said, I'm looking for the court files for this court case number. They said, yep, we've got it. We'll send it over to you in a PDF. It'll cost $50. And I got a treasure trove of information about a 9-year-old suing Nintendo,
which is not on the internet. This is this is a piece of public information that anyone can access, but it is not Googleable, and that I find fascinating.
Yeah,
right, and that is where the best information is.
No doubt,
of course.
It is not on the internet.
Of course. Yeah. Wow, so awesome,
fantastic.
My husband has one more question. He had a lot of questions, as you can tell. I know he's a big fan. But it's a good question. What is a subject that keeps getting away from being an episode because of the lack of information or misinformation?
Oh, good one.
Ooh.
I know, it's like he's smart or something.
That's a good question. Lack of information. One time I wanted to make an episode on Ape Escape. I don't know if you remember the Ape Escape game.
I do. I liked that game a lot.
Yeah, I really loved Ape Escape, and I wanted to do an episode, and there just wasn't enough out there. I couldn't make it historical enough, I guess. Mm-hmm. And so that's been on my back burner forever. Now, interesting about the Mario Paint video. That was a topic where Patreon voted for it, and I started researching it, and there's just not a lot about Mario Paint. Nintendo's notorious for not really talking about their development stories. In Mario Paint, there was like nothing. But Patreon voted for it, so I was like, well, I've got to make something about Mario Paint. And so it shifted from more of a, classic history to a social history of a game.
Yes.
So like,
Yes.
how did this game affect people? So that's an instance where, there's not a lot of information out there, but you work around it and you're able to tell a good history regardless.
Yep. You brought it, for anyone who hasn't seen it, you brought in at least one artist, if not a few, who were like, yes, it is the 21st century and my primary medium continues to be Mario Paint or a modded version of Mario Paint. I create music or whatever in this program because it meant so much to me, or it has these bizarre limitations that make it so interesting. And that aspect of the doc, in addition to, well, actually, this is leading me to another question about Mario Paint and Nintendo too, which you will likely have insight into. The framing of the Mario Paint episode is a lot about video games are taking over in this is Super Nintendo, so this is late 80s, early 90s, and parents are freaking out, media's freaking out, government's freaking out, OMG, the kids, and Nintendo's like, what if we can make an educational game? Because I guess that we had the Oregon Trails of the world, but we did not have educational software for consoles. And so some of this was Nintendo like placating those fears, but also making something very cool. And it didn't really sell that well, but although maybe I'm, please correct me if I'm mistaken. And so my larger question here is like, Nintendo continues to make weird stuff. I'm very pumped for Game Builder Garage, which is coming out in June for the Switch. But like, where is Mario Paint 2 and 3, and where is Mario Paint Switch? Like, why?
That's a good question. Mario Paint actually did sell pretty well for Nintendo, and it really was a reaction to, we've got to win over parents who are concerned about Nintendo taking over their children's lives. And so they said, well, if we put out an educational game, it will win parents over. I mean, in the video, I mentioned that Mario Paint was advertised in parental magazines,
right,
to get them to buy it for their kids. And they did try to do another Mario Paint. They did the Mario Artist series on the 64 disc drive.
Yeah.
But the disc drive was a complete mess. I mean, that only came out in Japan and no one really bought it. What Mario Paint essentially turned into Mario Maker.
Right.
And I think that's just where Nintendo wants to go with it. I just think you're going to sell a lot more of a game like that than Mario Paint. And I mean, Mario Maker has a lot of the stuff that Mario Paint had. Like, it's got the fly swatter game, and it's got some cool little references like the undo dog and
right.
And stuff.
There are like audio cues and stuff that have a lineage there. But then, you know what? It's funny. I was thinking about, I wanted to ask you this question, so I had been thinking about it. And what I am also realizing is that, like, it's 2021. You can grab Photoshop or GIMP or whatever from the internet, no problem, on an iPad. So there perhaps is no need for a modern Mario Paint.
Yeah, and that's another great point that is brought up in the video, that when Mario Paint came out, a personal computer was really expensive at that time, but a Super Nintendo with Mario Paint for $150, $159.95 was what the ad said. For $160, you get a full art program for your kid.
Yeah.
But yeah, today everyone has a computer. I mean, you can draw on your phone. So yeah, I think there's no necessity for something like Mario Paint anymore.
Yeah.
But there is I don't know if it's a necessity. I'll call it a necessity for, hey, I'm a kid, I'm 12, I want to make games. And now we have
Mario
Dreams, Mario Maker, and Game Builder Garage coming, and I think that's cool. Little Big Planet is kind of like that to an extent.
And they almost did it with the Mario Artist series. They almost put out a Game Builder Mario Artist game, but that one didn't come out.
Interesting. So these roots run deep, clearly across the generations here from Nintendo. Nintendo has seemingly always wanted to do this. And you said something earlier briefly that was like, Nintendo is so secretive about this stuff. And that is sad because, you know, you can count on one hand the people and companies that like completely revolutionized this medium. And for these, you know, elderly Japanese men to go to the grave with stories and secrets they will never share with the world is sad. It's like, I don't know, like Tolkien never talking about Middle Earth ever, you know, it's like, what the heck? Come on, give us something here.
Yeah, it's it is too bad. I don't know if it's like a cultural thing where the work life over in Japan is much different than here, and you know the companies are like don't share information about what you do at work. But yeah, it is frustrating. The good news is that like there is stuff out there that still needs to be discovered, and Nintendo does use like Shigeru Miyamoto is kind of the spokesperson at times where like he can be interviewed and he can kind of reveal.
Yeah, he'll dish every now and then.
He'll dish every now and then. You're right.
What else we have, Colette, from listeners, from Discord?
One more question, yes, from a Discord listener by the name of Desriel. They wanted to know which topic was the most fun for you to research?
Oh, that is a good question.
And maybe a big question.
Most fun to research. Okay, I'm not saying this just to push my new video, but I do think it was the Mega Modem. And I only say that because 90% of the sources were in Japanese.
Oh.
And so it was like every time I have a friend that does translations for me. Every time he translated a page, I was like, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. This is new. This is new. What? They did this? That's wrong. No, what? So it was like putting together this puzzle, and all the information we found. I mean, a lot of the articles right now on the internet about the Mega Modem, tons of errors.
Yeah.
And this research, I'm so proud of what we made, because it's I feel like it's the most comprehensive examination of the Mega Modem, and I think it is the only documentary ever made about a modem. So there you go.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like the explorer within me immediately connects to the idea of like translating documents no one's translated and being like, ooh.
It's so exciting. As a historian, it is extremely exciting.
Yeah, you're a video game archaeologist.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I have a colleague who says I am a historian, but I also have stalker traits, and it's you know the two kind of mix in together at times. But I'm not a stalker, I promise. But like finding emails or like certain information, it's like a lot of the things a stalker does, a historian does too.
Right.
Well, but I mean, journalists do too, so I totally get it. I mean, like I've had to go down those rabbit holes to find answers and be like, oh, the answer is not here. I have to go deeper. I have to call a person. So yeah, that's part of the fun. Do you ever have people that are like, how did you get this number?
Yes, I have. You know, how did you find my email? And I'm always honest with everybody. I'll say, look,
yeah,
I really wanted to interview you, so I did what I had to do to find you. Sorry.
Yeah.
But it's a reminder when you're on this side of it, the journalistic side, you're like, oh shit, like you think your information is not available, but it's
it's everywhere.
3 or 4 clicks away, and a smart person can find it. It's not hard.
Yeah, I love when people are like, oh, like this, social media conglomerate wants to share my information. And I'm like, you've been carrying around a freaking beacon in the form of your cell phone now for like 10, 15 years. Like, if you don't think that they don't know all your information, including every move you make, like you are wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. It's scary.
It is. I agree. Yeah. But, well, that is actually all the questions we have, unless my husband runs in the room and adds another one. So so before he does that, maybe we should get on to talking about what we're playing.
Let's talk about some games.
Okay.
before we get into what we are currently playing, we do have an email here from Joe.
Oh, yes.
Joe is a newer listener, I suppose, and wrote in and says that he's excited about the pod and is now listening regularly. And I said, hello, what are you playing? And Joe says, Space Engineers. Are we all familiar with Space Engineers?
I've never heard of that.
Never heard of it.
Really? Okay. I'm aware of it, but I have not played it. Joe says, Space Engineers has a survival and creative mode like Minecraft. My favorite way to play is to drop into a survival world, which is like a starter pod. Use the survival kit to start manufacturing resources, build a base, get out into space. Takes several hours. This is my kind of game.
I was just about to say, this is the most Matt game. I'm looking at pictures on my phone.
It's the most Matt game ever, and because we talked about Subnautica, we talked about Valheim, the slow, like starting with nothing, and every moment is a struggle, all laddering all the way up to, and now I'm in my spaceship, baby, and I'm flying through.
It's really cool that it's made by a Czech developer. I don't think I've played a lot of video games that have been made like from people that have come out of Czech.
Very cool.
That's awesome.
The other thing that the differentiator I'll say about Space Engineers from anything else I have played is that, and I have not played Space Engineers, but I'm going to stop recording and play it right now.
All right, we'll see you when you get back.
Yeah, take a pause or you chat, talk amongst yourselves. The spaceships have physics. So you're playing a survival group building game and it's like, I'm going to snap my base on here and everything just comes together and it's beautiful. But I believe, and Joe, if you're listening, please let us know if I'm saying this accurately. You have to build your spaceship in a way that will actually fly. The thrusters have to be on the correct side. It has force, it has mass, it has physics. So you can't just build a wacky thing. You have to build it properly, quote unquote, with these with the freedom of being able to build anything. And the game is incredibly cooperative. So I do know it's one of those games where it's like, hey, meet you in the game at 7:00. And then you jump in and you're building collaboratively with the goal, I believe, of like, hey, let's get off this planet. And maybe that's the end of the game or you fly to the next planet. So almost like Subnautica meets No Man's Sky, but with Kerbal Space Program, if that makes any sense to you guys. Kerbal Space Program is like figuring out the physics and the propulsion and the chemistry of shipbuilding so that you can get your little Kerbals off the planet. And it's an engineering game, basically. It is a game about engineering. And obviously, Space Engineers has that in the title. So, Joe, thank you for your email. Space Engineers has been on my list for so long, and your email has perhaps bumped it a bit higher in the queue. So thank you so much.
Awesome.
Colette, what are you playing right now?
For the last week or so, we've kind of forsaken Resident Evil a little bit, which I actually am like, gosh, I really want to get back to that. But a close friend of ours, who is also a mutual streamer, gifted both my husband and I a copy of a game for VR called Demeo. And so the way he described it to me is he was like, this is kind of like playing a D&D board game in the Stranger Things basement, but with like a strategy RPG angle. And I was like, okay. And that is quite exactly what it is. So, imagine very much if you've ever sat down at a table and played D&D, no matter where you are. And, if you played D&D the classic way, you only had your player sheets, right? But I know that D&D board games exist. So at that point, you have like your little painted miniatures and you're actually moving on a board. So that's basically the 3D version of what Demeo is. So you hop in, you can play with up to 3 other people, so a party of 4 ideally, and you get to choose from, basic classes. I think there's a warrior, an assassin, an archer, and a magician. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. So you get to see each campaign, which they even made up their own little like pamphlets for the campaign, which you can pick up and look at, and they look just like that D&D look. It's really cool. You get in there and you are basically like playing turns, moving your pieces, and then you have to go through in each campaign 3 dungeon levels, which sounds easy, and it is literally the opposite of that. So what's interesting about it, there's a few interesting things that I really am enjoying. Number one, it is not easy. There are tons of enemies, and even if you play with a full party of 4, circumventing and dealing with those enemies is a challenge. So it's not like impossibly hard, but it's not easy. Mm-hmm. And I like that. We had to play through, we still haven't finished the first campaign, and we had to play through it. I'd say we've played through it now probably 3 or 4 times, and had to learn different combinations of what races, or rather what characters work well together and which ones don't work at all. And so like, it's kind of like if you fuck up, like you have to go, oh, okay, well, maybe, 2 magicians and 1, assassin would work. And, maybe because this one can do this, and then this one can, go invisible and go into stealth. And so figuring that out is cool, but it also is randomized. So every time you go in, monsters are going to be in different places.
Oh, great.
Right. So it's never the same. The floor itself will change too. So you never are going to play through the same floor. So we've played it both 2-player and 4-player. 2-player is way harder because that seems, and this is where I talk about quickly the 2 things that I feel like probably need some work. Number one, it doesn't seem like it downscales difficulty at all.
I was just going to ask, there's no scaling here?
No, not to me. Like playing with 2, the only way playing with 2 we were able to make progress through a level was to both be assassins, and you can use sneak really regularly and disappear. That was like the only way we could really do it, because there's so many enemies. So then when we played 4-player, I was like, seems like the same number of enemies, and it pretty much was. But of course, with 4 people, it wasn't, quite as bad. It's still challenging.
Yeah, that's strange.
Yeah, but it's, these are indie developers. They have their own Discord, so they're very like open to feedback. So I'm thinking that it's kind of going to be one of those things where they update and change things as they go. And I feel like it's good enough to where I'm willing to hang in for that and enjoy it for what it is.
I want to back up briefly, because you glossed over it, and I know I'm aware of the game because we had chatted about it a little bit, but this is VR. And so when you say campaigns and pieces and characters, you are inside a VR looking down and picking up tokens and miniatures and placing them on the board. This is not, a Divinity Original Sin kind of situation. No. You are physically in a room with a board with, quote unquote, physically with your players.
And that has pluses and minuses, which was the last thing I was going to mention. Okay. The plus is, of course, oh my gosh, it's like I'm literally playing a board game. How cool is that, right? And it is cool. You can use your hands to like move the board around and like go down into it, so you can like peer down over it and like get like the top down, like looking at Diablo kind of version, or you can go way in and literally put your face right in the middle of the dungeon, and like that's pretty cool, So I think it's definitely fun to be able to do that. That said, and I think this is an old problem, it hurts my neck. So if I've been playing for like 2 hours, which is easy because it's a slow paced game. You take your time making those decisions of where are we going to go next? What are we going to do? How do you want to attack that guy? How do we take that guy out? Do we need to take this one out? And before we move on to those, like that kind of stuff. So like we'll play for 2 hours and like maybe get through like 1-2 floors of the dungeon. And like by the time it's done, I'm like, I have an Oculus Quest 2, so it's like the lightest current VR visor, and it still hurts my neck.
That's a lot of time to be in VR, especially in
with
an
your
environment.
Head down.
Yeah, because it's casual. You're hanging out. You're not.
Right. So one of the big thoughts I've had is, as cool as it is in VR, I hope that at some point they might put it on just like PC or like on a console, because I think you could still get a lot of the fun of like moving the direction, around and looking down into it or whatnot without necessarily doing it in a visor. But I mean, I feel like, like my husband didn't say anything about that, for instance. So, like it's an old problem. Like my neck hurts anyway, so I'm just like, the elderly.
Person,
then he's like, oh, well, you could get like, the battery that's the other thing. It'll kill your battery. So you have to play plugged in if you plan on like finishing a campaign. And so he's like, oh, you could get the battery pack and like put it, on the back of your visor, and then you get, a longer lasting time, but also it might balance it out. And I was like, cool, let's put more weight on my head.
More weight.
But I mean, on the whole, I have to say it's really refreshing. It's not quite like anything I've played before. It's definitely not like anything I've played in VR at all. And so I definitely feel like it's something that's worth checking out if any of those elements of it appeal.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, nothing but mostly good things to say about it.
I wish I could play more VR. I get like
get sick.
Nauseous. Yeah.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. I love Beat Saber.
It's so fun.
Man, after like 30 minutes, I'm like, I think I'm going to puke.
Yeah,
even with
hard.
Beat Saber, it really, Norman, because like your vantage point is not moving around in Beat Saber. You're in a static place, and even then, you're still feeling that.
Yeah. Yep.
Man.
Yeah, I was going to say if that gives you trouble, then no, definitely it would definitely, because that's like at least stationary. But I was going to say I had that same issue when I first played on the Rift, and like my husband was like, "Oh my God, virtual reality!" Rah! And I was like, I played a space game and everything was moving, and I was like, I'm gonna puke.
Yeah.
Like, this is bad. So, I'm hoping that as VR continues to develop, that perhaps like they'll get to a point where it's not as nauseating for people as the resolution continues to improve. I hope.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess we'll see. So but yeah, so that's really kind of my summary on Demeo. It's definitely worth playing. And if anybody's on the podcast is listening and you're interested in playing and you have VR, feel free to hop into our Discord, which we'll share info about at the end of the show. And if you'd like to play with us, we'd love to play with you.
Super quick technical questions are... you were describing, you can get in close to the board. Do you need to physically... Is it standing and then you are physically kneeling down, looking down, or can you move your vantage point with the sticks?
Yeah, so basically what it looks like in the game is that once you put your visor on and stuff, like, you're looking at a board and you're in a basement. Like, it's literally like Stranger Things. And like, you're sitting in your basement with your little cool board, and you have gloved hands that you can see. And you can take those hands and just move the board around, like to any, zoom into it, come out of it, tilt it, whatever. So they did that part. I think is really cool, because as you play, things move and you have to continue to kind of move along with them. So that's how you.
But you could sort of sit in one place comfortably, and then
it's a stationary game.
Move the board to you. Bring it to you.
Right. I play it seated in a chair, but you could play it standing. It's just that you'd be standing up for 2 hours plus, and maybe you don't necessarily want to do that.
But then you were talking about playing wirelessly with Oculus. Like, is this inside the? I know it's on Steam, but I'm saying if I get it on Steam and you are on Oculus, are we going to have issues there, or can we? Can we cross-play?
I don't think it's even available on Oculus. I could be wrong, but like I looked it up on Steam, and it's just VR only Windows. So I think that's your only option right now.
That's fine by me. And then wait, so were you playing wirelessly using the wireless link stuff?
No, I was plugged in every time that I played it. I haven't set up the wireless link thing yet, because unfortunately for us, our router is in the living room and the computer is set up in my office, and those two things are not close together.
Right.
So for us to get that to work, optimally, we'd have to move the whole rig into the living room, which we've done once or twice. It's just a pain in the butt.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. Keep me posted on that, because I would like to. I would like to check that out if it is good.
Great.
Cool. Norman, tell us what you're currently playing, and this might be something for the job. It could be something you're enjoying, retro, new. What's going on?
Okay, let's see. I am working on a Super Mario World episode.
Yeah.
So I've been playing a lot of Super Mario World, which is always fun. As far as modern games, this came out a few years ago, but I just absolutely love it still. Me and my friends play Apex Legends.
Yeah.
And it's one of those games I love because I can jump into it and play a few games and then jump out of it and get back to work.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I've been playing a lot of lately.
I haven't touched it, but I'm not really into competitive shooters at all. I can't think of any time, but I've said this on the podcast before. Like Star Wars Squadrons, it really spoke to me, and then I got into it, and then got really into it in a competitive way. Not that I'm any good at it, but just I felt for the first time in my gaming life, like, yeah, I gotta compete. I gotta get better. I gotta get good. And all of a sudden, I'm now feeling more aware of Apex Legends kinds of games of like, okay, I'm going to get in with a squad. Like you said, hop in, do my best and try to rank up or whatever. So what I've heard so many, like just the gunplay is really good. The characters are good. The classes are good. Like what keeps you engaged with it?
Yeah, the gunplay is fantastic, and the different characters you can be all have their own unique abilities, and it's fun because you do it in teams of 3, and so it's fun to see how the different characters can interact with each other in your team. And there is a competitive mode, but there's also like sometimes people just goof off in that game. I've seen some crazy stuff. But yeah, I just like to play with my friends. I've always played online shooters with my friends since high school. Mm-hmm. I remember playing like Medal of Honor Allied Assault way back in the day. And I remember the original Call of Duty. I always wonder, like, kids that play Call of Duty today, if they played the original Call of Duty, what would they think?
Interesting.
Because it's changed so much. That series has been around forever.
It has.
Really?
And they
really
come out
has.
with one every year now, I think.
Right. It's like Madden almost. It's the same thing, but there's iterations and graphical improvements and you know, I think there are types of gamers. I was talking about this the other day of like, I buy an Xbox and I buy Call of Duty and that's what I play. Mm-hmm. That's is what they do. And that's cool. I mean, I respect that.
Yeah. Whatever makes you happy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you have a lot of history with online shooters to sort of to see the lineage here of where we are with Apex. And so, you know, how's the community? Have you spent money there? Like, are you like, I got to get this cool cosmetic, or are you like free to play? Like, how do you feel about that stuff?
Apex is free to play. And then they have like the, you know, different seasons. So you pay, I think it's like $10 to get the season pass. And then the more you play, you level up your season pass and you can unlock skins and rewards and whatnot. I did buy a season pass when they had their first season. But what's cool is if you complete the pass, the next season is free because you earned enough coins to get the next season for free. So
that's cool.
Now I will say their skins are ridiculously expensive. I've never bought one because I think it's a ripoff, and they don't help you in the game. It's just a cosmetic. But yeah, their season passes are cool, and really, you really just have to buy one of them. And for $10, I've spent over 100 hours in Apex Legends. I think $10 is well worth.
Well, that's what I always
season pass.
Even with the cosmetics too, it's like $20 for a skin, and people are like, "This is outrageous," but it's like, but you've gotten 500 hours of entertainment out of a thing. That's worth 20. I'll throw $20 for like an awesome haircut in a game and call it a day. Like that's all right. That's all right.
Yeah, and the production values in that game are just outstanding.
Yeah,
Respawn did a really good job with that game. By the way, did you know Respawn won an Oscar this year?
What?
Yes, I did hear that. But what was it for?
Okay, Respawn developed a Medal of Honor game for VR.
Okay,
I can't remember what it's called. Hang on, I'm going to Google it real quick. Medal of Honor VR. Medal of Honor Above and Beyond. It was on the Oculus Rift.
Okay.
It's a first-person shooter VR game. So Respawn developed it. It got okay reviews, but included in the game, they did some like documentaries about World War II. And they did one about a French resistance fighter who goes to a concentration camp where her brother died. And it was very good. Hang on. See if I can remember the name of it.
Was the film in VR in some way? Or you're saying it's a documentary? How does that tie into the VR stuff?
It was, I think it was just like an extra you could watch that came with the game. The name of the documentary is Colette.
Oh.
It was a short film. It's like a 15-minute documentary, I think. It was fantastic. I did watch it. And so it won the Oscar this year for best short documentary. And so Respawn Entertainment, which developed the game, was a producer of the documentary. They got an Oscar.
Fantastic.
Wow.
And I think that's the first time a video game studio has won an Oscar, and they are super proud of it. I think in their Twitter bio it says Oscar winning video game company or something like that. It's great.
It's only a matter of time before Epic wins some sort of technical achievement Oscar, because Unreal is being used in the movies all the time, and The Mandalorian and all these high budget TV shows, creating 3D sets rather than green screens, which look way better on camera these days. There's a lot of stuff happening in that world that I find interesting.
Yeah. So there you go. Respawn, Oscar winning studio made Apex Legends. It's a really fun game.
Excellent.
So I enjoy playing it with my friends. I have tried to play it by myself. It's not as fun because you get paired up with like random people, and that game really is about teamwork. And so if you're playing with random people, maybe you don't make a good team
right
all the time.
Yes. I think about that often with these games. I found, and then, Colette, we were talking about playing on what we like about playing online and not online. And I don't have any gaming friends, so I don't have a crew to hop in with. But when you figure out your role, like if you're a certain class or character and you work at it and do it really well, then there's a way to get in with randos and then still carry the day sometimes. And that does feel good sometimes if everyone's doing their job.
Yeah. And Apex has this, what I love about what they did with when you play with random people, they have this pinging system in the game.
Oh, right.
So you can like ping items you find, and your character will say, "Oh, I found this gun. Oh, I found this ammo." And it'll show on the map to the other players where it is. So you don't actually have to use your microphone to talk to anybody. You can just ping everything, and you're communicating with your team, which I love because I have very bad anxiety and I hate talking to random people I play games with.
This is the thing that has made me the loner gamer for my entire life. Like when I was younger, it was like I just didn't have gaming friends. But now as an adult, like the idea of like playing with strangers is so anxiety provoking that I just won't do it. Like I hate it. So I'll only play with my friends,
Yeah. And I've had bad experiences with online shooters and random people and them saying horrible things, and I'm like, I don't like this. Apex is great because I can mute everybody and I can just ping everything and say, look, I'm going here. Oh, I found this gun. So
perfect.
It's a wonderful system.
Yeah, Apex really innovated there from what I've seen and read, but it seems to be a trend. Like I play Deep Rock Galactic, which is a cooperative. You're not competing against other players, but you're in a mine with other players, and the pinging system sounds very similar to what you described there. Of like, hey, here's an item, mine this, go here, and almost no one's on voice chat. And then with Squadrons, it's like, there was a lot of discussion of like, hey, community, hey, everyone, get on the mic because we are flying an X-Wing squadron into the capital ship and we got to coordinate. And if you're on mic with people, it's actually, you're in a fucking Star Wars movie. Like it's that good of a system. But if you are not, there is still a ping system where it's like, okay, defend me, go here, regroup here. And it's, but like, you're flying a ship and managing engines and shields and everything and situational awareness, and being able to also then ping and respond to pings in that situation is a lot. So that's why people are like, hey, everyone get on the mic, who's here, kind of thing. It's interesting.
Yeah, Apex really innovated with that, and you're seeing more online shooter games do the same thing that Apex. I think the new Call of Duty Battle Royale game has a similar pinging system. It's not as good as Apex's, but you see developers are trying to, copy what's going on. And Apex also introduced the ability to respawn in a Battle Royale game, because in older Battle Royale games, when you died, you're done.
You're done.
You're out of the game. But Apex introduced a respawn system where, like, if your teammates can get to your body, they can like pick up this like chip off your body and then can go to like a respawn beacon, and you can come back into the game, which is super cool.
That's really fun too, because there's like it incentivizes teamwork. It incentivizes, hey, don't leave a player behind because your team will lose if you do. What kind of thing?
Yeah, and I can attest that when you are down a teammate in Apex, it is extremely hard to win. Yeah. Like if you have a full squad, you have a much better chance.
All right, Space Engineers, Apex Legends.
The list
do you play?
Grows.
What do you play on? Is it a console or PC?
I play on my
platform?
PC, but it's cross play with everything: Nintendo Switch, Xbox, PlayStation.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, like I mentioned, I'm playing a lot of Super Mario World, and that's just an all-time great game.
It's so amazingly good.
And my wife played it a lot growing up, and she knows all the secrets. and I don't remember. And she's like, take the cape, go up there, put the key in the hole. And I'm like, how do you remember this? I had no idea this was here. So she's been helping me
love it,
complete the game.
Nice. A Mario game where, hey, this level, it has 4 endings. This one level.
Yes.
4 fucking ways to do, like, amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, my mind was blown when I was playing it when I was younger, and there's a secret exit to a level, and it opens up in the world this level where you can like get Yoshi, get fire flowers, get mushrooms, and get feathers in just this one little area. So it's like you can just recharge everything and get extra lives, and that blew my mind as a kid. I was like, wow, I can't believe I found this. Of course, when you discover it when you're younger, you think you're the only one that found it, but everyone found that, I'm sure.
What's the angle of that episode, if you are able to share, or if maybe you don't even know yet? But is it just like the history of this game, or is there a particular thing you're investigating about it?
Well, it's probably going to be a general history, but I think it's a story of a company that is introducing a brand new system. They're dealing with criticism because they announce it's not backwards compatible.
Right.
And of course, parents are up in arms about that. And it's a team of developers at Nintendo led by Takashi Tezuka, not Miyamoto, taking this new technology and making something special for the system to get people to buy it. And that's how we got Super Mario World. And I think their original plan, they originally just ported Super Mario Brothers 3 to the Super Nintendo, and they're like, what if we just release this? And they thought, no, we can do better than this.
Cool.
There's so much more the Super Nintendo could do. So I'm still researching it right now, but I think it's going to be a pretty interesting story.
Think of how different the world would be if they had just been like, just put Mario 3 on the new one.
Well, it ended up being Super Mario All-Stars.
Sure. Yes.
So they said, okay, we ported Mario 3. Let's do Mario 2. Let's do the original Mario, and we'll do that's. And that's how we learned about the lost levels and all that fun stuff.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. In the interest of time, I don't have anything new. Still playing Subnautica Below Zero and loving it. Still playing Deep Rock Galactic, and playing a lot. Just a stupid amount of Magic the Gathering Arena, Colette.
Oh, I do play Magic the Gathering.
Do you play Arena online, which is the app and the PC game? What do you think?
The PC version.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this about me, but I used to play Magic the Gathering professionally.
What?
Yes.
I did not know. That's amazing.
I
Go
have 6 lifetime pro points.
What does that?
From long
what does
ago.
that mean? What is a pro point? I don't know.
So when you play in a professional, like on the Pro Tour, depending on how well you do, you earn pro points, and so like you can earn all these pro points, and then you can get invited to future tournaments, and then they have like the Magic the Gathering Hall of Fame where people have like thousands of pro points, like the best of the best. So it's kind of like a gauge of how good you are, I guess.
Okay.
Wow.
But this was back in 2006 when I graduated high school and started college. Yeah, I was super into Magic the Gathering. Loved it. When
I tell my husband this, his brain is literally going to melt because he's also a massive Magic fan, and I think he like already loves you enough, but like I don't think he's going to be able to handle this.
That's great.
He'll be at your doorstep in a couple of days.
Yeah.
But so elaborate on when you say I play Magic professionally. Like what does that mean? Tournaments where there were prize pools at stake? What's going on?
So Magic has a Pro Tour system. And to get on the Pro Tour, you have to qualify for the Pro Tour. And so they have these regional tournaments. And if you win the regional tournament, you get invited to the Pro Tour.
Okay.
And so I won 2 regional tournaments. I competed in 2 Pro Tours. I competed in one in Prague in the Czech Republic.
Wow.
And then I competed in one in Kobe, Japan.
Wow.
And I didn't do very well at either one, but I had a wonderful time and it was a great experience.
That's rad.
Awesome.
Yeah, I love Magic the Gathering. It is such a good game. And sometimes when I wake up in the morning and I'm drinking coffee, I'll fire up Arena and I'll just play against the bot, Sparky. You know, the little practice bot you can just destroy. And it's just, I don't know, it's a nice way to start my morning, I guess.
It gets the brain moving.
I'm curious, Norman, how do you feel about like the current like version of, you know, what Magic is right now versus like what Magic was like when it launched? Just a side note to this, I was a first like original series Magic player, and when I try to play Magic now, I'm like, there's so many cards, there's so many things to remember, like, and I get overwhelmed.
It's just reminding me of Pokemon, where it's like there's so many cards.
I get overwhelmed easily, but it's like, you know, I remember when it was probably like 4 or 5 expansions in, so this is like way the hell back in the 90s. But I remember that it was like, oh, we're going to start using tokens on your cards, and I was like, why is this so complicated? Which really it's not, but like I just like, you know, things very simple. So I'm just curious about your take.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always nostalgic for the era that I played in, which was, you know, 2004, 2006 era. The cards just keep getting more and more powerful in Magic. So I love limited. I love doing drafts because I think it kind of contains the amount of cards you're exposed to. And that's what I really like to play.
Yeah.
Constructed, forget it. I won't do it because it's very expensive.
Yeah.
To play constructed.
Right.
And there's also, you go on the internet, you find what the best deck is, and you make it, and then you play in a tournament. And it's like, well, there's not a lot of creativity in that. And so that's why I like drafting, because you never know what you're going to go up against.
You got to make do with what you pull. But let me ask you about when in those tournaments that you competed in, what is the format? Is it like bring the cards you got, and as long as they're legal, have at it? Or is it a draft? Or like what's going on?
So it depends on the Pro Tour that you're trying to qualify for. So the Pro Tours that I qualified for were limited Pro Tours. So the tournaments that I competed in were limited. So it was sealed deck. You know, they give you sealed deck and then like 2 booster packs, I think, and then you have to make a deck with what you
that's
got.
true skill.
Mm-hmm.
Like you haven't spent 400 hours optimizing and getting to know your personal deck. You're like, you got to know the game
on the fly. Yep.
And on the fly. Yeah, that's
right.
cool.
There's a deck building skill involved with limited, and the cards behave differently in limited because, you know, a card that's really good in limited might not be very good in constructed. They're just such different formats, you know? But yeah, I love limited. Love it.
Get it.
And I still play it to this day.
I was saying to Colette at the beginning of the show, like, I have just discovered it. Like, I've always been Magic curious, and then the app came, but never had anyone to play with. So I had no way to access this impenetrable game. Then the app finally came around, which is crazy, actually, because Pokemon's has been digital for a long time, and the fact that there was no online way to play this game, or that there was no easy online way to play this game, I'll modify there. So I got into it and started learning it, and I said to Colette, I'm like, how the hell do people play paper? How do they keep track of everything? Because I'm only hanging on here because the cards are like, you can play this now. And I'm like, okay, well, let's try it.
Yeah. Now, you can turn all that off, I think, in Arena. You can say, don't give me hints.
No hints.
Yeah. Gosh, when I played Paper Magic, I would use a D20 as my life counter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then I would, I'd have little tokens if I had to make tokens. And yeah, I mean, going from paper to Arena, it's a lot easier. Yeah, I can imagine if you went from Arena to paper. Yeah, it'd be a little bit of a learning curve.
I have dabbled now in paper. A family member had a box of cards, and we played, and it was nice to put my Arena knowledge onto the table, and I was able to follow along, and then hopped over to the local game store with my kids and got what do they call them? Dual decks, which are just like, here's a red deck, here's a blue deck. You get what you get. And now you can sit down and play casually with whoever, almost like a deck of cards. You would play Gin Rummy
the
because
pre-made
the deck
decks.
is there.
Yeah,
pre-made decks.
Those are cool, especially if you're trying to teach somebody how to play the game.
It's been nice to do that with my kids, and my son really enjoy. It's crazy because like my son is 5, like he can't even read, but he understands the colors, and he understands that the lands are what you need to get the deck flow. Like, and that's just rad. It's just cool to see that. It's fun to be able to sit down with him.
Magic will outlive us all.
It will. And you know what? I was watching Antiques Roadshow the other day. A lady had like the Power 9 Magic cards from
I just saw
the
that
first set.
Wow.
And it was worth like $145,000 or something insane like that.
Yep.
And I'm like, man, yeah, this game has been around forever. And you know what? I'm glad Arena is out, because when I was playing, all they had was Magic the Gathering Online, and it was the clunkiest program I have ever used in my life.
Wow.
And I was like, how does a major gaming company put out something like this? And then Blizzard did Hearthstone, and it was fantastic. And I think it kind of lit a fire under Wizards of the Coast butt and said, oh, we should probably do something with this wildly successful card game we have.
With like the game that invented card games. Yeah. Maybe we should do something on the internet
too.
You know, I'm really glad we had this conversation, because I tried to start playing Magic again, the physical Magic, a few years ago. And I was playing with my husband and a couple of our friends, and they're all like OCD deck builders, where like they're like, I got to get all these really good cards, and then they'll like build these like insane decks. And I was just like, that's not really how I like to play. Like, I really prefer it like, you know, the way that we're talking about, like to focus on just being given a deck and doing it like skill style versus like
drafting,
drafting. So I'm like, I'm going to tell my husband that I'm ready to play drafting style now, and he can just fuck right off with his overstuffed decks of overpowered cards. I can't wait till he listens to this.
All right. On that note, Norman, we have kept you far too long. But before you go, everyone is aware of your channel, and of course, we will link to the channel itself. But if there are specific episodes or projects or things to look out for, obviously, Mega Modem is out. What else is cooking on your end that you want to share with our listeners?
I definitely want to encourage everyone to check out the Sega Mega Modem episode. I think you're going to be. I know you're thinking of video about a modem. There's no way this is interesting. I promise you, it is so interesting. What
best
Sega
modem video on the internet?
Yeah, what
guaranteed?
But you did it. I mean, I hate to be that fangirl, but it's a gaming historian video about a modem, so it will be good.
That's right. Yeah, it's just incredible what Sega did with this thing, and this is like 10 years before you see it again in the video game industry. Yeah. This was so ahead of its time. So I really encourage people to check out the Mega Modem video. I think you're really going to like it. And then I'm working on the Super Mario World video, which I hope will be out in time for the 30th anniversary, which is this August. Mm-hmm. And then I'm also doing the U-Force, which is that weird Nintendo controller. So look for that this year.
Outstanding. Awesome. Outstanding. Norman, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, you have been listening to Colette and Matt have entered the chat. Thank you for chatting with us. As you've heard, questions for our guests, emails about what you are playing. We want them all. If you are dabbling in any of the games we discussed today or just want to share what you are playing, love it or hate it, we want to know about it. So please send your emails to haveenteredthechat@gmail.com. Don't pull your car over to the side of the road to write that down. It will be in the show notes, so just come on back and get it there. Our theme music is by Azure Flux. Our logo is illustrated by Just Call Me Katarina. And if you are enjoying the show, tell a friend and leave a rating or review in your favorite podcast app. That really helps us out. Norman, thank you again for being with us. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. This was fun.